Hello, and welcome to episode number 3 of Cybeats Powerhouse Perspectives. I am Chris Blask, the Vice President of Strategy at Cybeats, and I am currently on the vessel Mark Twain, several hundred yards off the Boca Chica Naval Air Station. And with me today is Winn Schwartau, where are you in, and who are you? How'd you get here, and what'd you do with my cat?
Right now I live in Nashville. It's raining outside, and I've been thinking security stuff since 1983 and done a bunch of stuff in those years.
Written books and done various things.
Yeah.
So supply chain security is sort of all we think about at work these days, and now it's all over the news and everybody's talking about it. And you had, before this, because we talked about these things in a lot of the context, said, well, what are we going to talk about? Supply chain in alien warp drive systems. And I think that's actually a great frame to look at it. I think I think about these inevitability curves all the time. If look out far enough in the future, if something really doesn't have a solution, that means for hundreds and thousands and millions of years, our descendants or any species out there would never solve XYZ. And right now we're all wrestling with this supply chain, transparency, custody, intellectual property. How do I manage to blah, blah, blah? And I think looking forward, to our, future selves who have warp drive systems, they're actually literally trying to deal with these, software and hardware supply chain issues across very large distances where moving things, even information, has consequences that need to be engineered in. And either we can solve these issues or we can't have that. We can't have spaceships, right? So the first question is, so if we can take that, from the forward-looking back sort of view, start with that, right? If there are any vast alien civilizations out there in the universe, then by definition, they will have had to solve this already, right? If there are, as you and I discussed, the various options, the way this could work, not having, it's not just, iron and bolts, is the custody of information in time and space, has to be handled in the same sort of ways we're trying to deal with software in modern day energy supply systems.
I really hate that I brought this up to you at all. There's two aspects that come to mind. Is one is the nuts and bolts aspect of, as sci-fi Star Trek say, I don't have enough dilithium crystals. Why the hell don't you? We're out of negative energy. Why are you out of negative energy? Because it's drama? Yeah. Are there going to be limitations? Some of the proposed hyper theoretical kind of models suggest that pulling propulsion energy out of the universe, out of the 0 point fields and all of that. And if that's true, then the nuts and bolts carrying along of all that stuff becomes pretty much a non-issue. If you're talking about foodstuffs and survival mechanisms for supply chain, if it's that far ahead, does warp speed travel also mean that we have a food maker or automatic at atomize, and we can, hello computer, give me an omelet? Are we going to be at that point? I would probably argue not, that there's going to be another supply chain, maybe much more about keeping people alive than keeping propulsion going.
Right.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, which takes us, I was going to say, you're right. There's that theoretical thing, which is worth arguing against, but we have a very near term future, that, those of us around, are young enough to see happen. And some of it is happening now. We have Linux running on Mars, right? The moon base whole thing, is coming to fruition this decade, more or less. Right. And again, these, the without saying the acronym that everybody's saying all the time, the current issue in software supply chain, security that's consuming all the bandwidth this week and so forth, is running on a helicopter on Mars right now, or is present.
Yep.
So we have to move over shorter periods of time, this decade, next 10, 20, 30, 40 years, even looking 50 and 100 years out in the future, I would expect we have quite a complex system in the solar system. It's not just on Earth. It really does, practically, pragmatically, to the point that right now we need to figure it out, push these issues. How do we have software supply chain into places you can't get to from here, right?
Well, I know in our conversations, one of the things that I have been harping about for 35 years, I use the word provenance. And provenance is really important in the art world if you're going to spend $140 million on a painting. One of the areas that I have bitched about ever since I became aware of early security models back in the 80s was, why don't we practice integrity? Why don't we have provenance built into source material creation? We blockchain-ish kind of things have that capability. Cool. So why shouldn't cameras have source material, blockchain-ish integrity mechanisms so that I can then easily, anybody can say, oh, that's been modified. I can't trust that deep fake, that image, that video, that audio, that piece of media. And as you also know, I go on and on about trust. And unless there is provenance trust that's established at the giddy up, the rest of it is pretty meaningless, and you're just a wing and a prayer. And then the second aspect up in space is, okay, you got the hardware nuts thing. Okay, I solved all that quite clearly. But then it's information. Does FTL, and I'm not trying to say it is, but does FTL, Alcubierre, all of the warp drives, does that in any way mean that we're also going to have communications that are going to be FTL? And I'm really hate using FTL because that technology, it's really not an FTL technology, but that's the common way of thinking of it.
Right.
So does universal entanglement provide a vehicle for instantaneous communications? According to Shannon's theories, no. According to Einstein, no. According to some new fundamental quantum mechanics thinking, let's not throw it on the fire heap just yet, because we're discovering new shit all the time that's like, every day there's something like, holy Christ, I didn't know that was going to happen.
Well, and against all that, is there's still causality, right? Take the lag out of it and so forth. And it's interesting to think into long distances and but this still follows that. And I see in a lot of the structures being discussed today, the automation that's effectively what you need. But it takes because it should in our world today take microseconds, right? I go through examples all the time where it's like something happens, everybody's agreed what happens under these circumstances. And just in the software bill of material world, like if a vulnerability comes out from a reputable source, you have built into your contract, everybody does. And you just automate that, so you get the vulnerability, you see where everything is, you see the information you didn't have yet, but everybody's agreed that under conditions you get that, which is what we do already. And all of this is just automating, all of this IT stuff is about automating human processes. And
you got to, when I think about automation, that word can also scare a hell of a lot of people because you think, oh, the robot's gone amok. Okay. The way I tend to think about it would be an intelligently modifiable SOAR, where I've got my normal operations, which are going to go through normal automated, repeatable processes. But a lot of the systems that have been designed over the years don't have enough internal, wait a minute, that doesn't fit. Let's go over to the side here and go take a look at another path. And we have not had enough dynamic pathing in many of our systems. They tend to, we say fail safe and we think, again, binary, it's on or off. But wait a minute, there's a lot of stuff. In fact, the whole world is in between binary. So I think that when we say automation, and I hate to use the word intelligent as well, but we'll just say ML-driven guidance, where there's an awful lot more pathing and options in the trees to be able to make decisions intelligently.
Well, you talk about FTL AI, right? It's not artificial, it's not intelligence, but what the hell it's the acronym we have to work with right now.
Yeah,
I think a lot about the future of human work. I think there's plenty of work to be had. Because there's that human element. You automate everything you want, and every time I look at these highly technical, highly legal structures, there's still a human somewhere that has to make a decision based on complex conditions. But to solve the issues of with or without the instant communication, right? But to solve those issues, to have proper planning in advance, as you said, and other people have been working on for decades now, and then using the I think very similar sort of. So here at the Boca Chica Naval Air Station, you see everything fly over. There's the big plane. The airframes have been flying for 50 years, land overhead. 50 years ago, developing airframes was leading edge technology on Earth, but there's a certain ideal form, and it will change dramatically over time and so forth. However, that certain ideal form always works. So the point that a C-130 is always a C-130, right? And I think right now we're developing some of these structures that really will always work, because it doesn't really matter if it's 3 or 7 in CIA or whatnot. It's can we have a repeatable structure? Right in there.
I tend to think when it comes to whether it's integrity or supply chain tends to bring up the physical domain pretty quickly in our mind, especially with the Suez Canal, COVID, food, Long Beach, LA piers, and all that crap. And after your note this morning, we're really going to talk about aliens. I wanted to ask a question of myself, and it's something that's always bothered me. All right, the pyramids, we'll just say Cheops. Rough numbers, best numbers we have, 2.2 million blocks, 20 years. What happens when you start parsing the math and you look at it through a supply chain lens? Answers become very, very difficult to say, how the hell did they do that? How do you create a supply chain of 2.2 million things that weigh 3 tons each? And if we build integrity into that, none of them broke along the way. And how, with the precision that the pyramid was made, that just adds more time. And each element of the supply chain is a time function. You've heard me rant about time for 25 years now.
Right.
And supply chain analysis, the better ones use time in their Gantt charts to make sure things are done correctly. Those that ignore the time domain are praying and hoping that their partners and third-party folks are just going to do their job, and they leave it as a blank. And I think that's a huge mistake.
Well, and shout out to Stuart Phillips, right? That I've been working with for 25 years, who pointed out to me that sometimes things just change, and they're economic drivers. Right. Mm-hmm. And you can, the real message is not, be more secure or have more, functions and features, is that things are changing right now, and whoever adopts that will survive, will outcompete. And, however it works out, I think we're at one of those evolutionary cruxes. And I see it every day.
You keep saying that, and I don't disbelieve you, but you've said it so often. I don't know why you think that, why this period in time is a crux that's so important that you keep bringing up.
Well, yeah. So then this is about you. So Anthony may edit this one out, but
it's a conversation.
It's a repeated cycle I see, right? And it's my early days, in the internet was the early firewall era, and I'm looking around saying everybody's on the internet, they all need firewalls. And the common wisdom was no. The Fortune 1000 and the big government, that's it. Some old fogey my age told me that back then, with all the experience in the world. And the turn of the century and the security management, SIM, and all this stuff, right? Threat intelligence, sharing information between.
Every year at RSA, it's a different buzzword.
But and some what I look for at RSA, for example, is not whether anybody's right about the buzzword, it's how many are adopting it in which ways over, say, 3 years, right? And it fades out or it doesn't, right? And if it doesn't, if it does, it is probably just a thing. But with with supply chain is really just transparency. The supply chain of the threat intelligence, the supply chain of the actual firewalls. How do I understand where things are? And with each of these changes, obviously the firewall area changed everything because that's the beginning of the internet. Early 2000s, from a network management perspective and security management perspective, nobody was managing networks in the 90s. I'll give everybody an insider. In 1998, I as product line manager at Cisco, I had stopped development of the Pix Firewall Manager, this little piece of software, because we were so strapped to just save the product and get it going. And for 4 years, we didn't do any updates on that code, except it wouldn't crash if it saw the new version of Pix. And nobody noticed, because in the late 90s, early 2000s, nobody was managing firewalls. They're configuring, deploying them, and never looking at them again. But that changed. Network management and the possibility of cloud came out of that era. So now we're in this era of transparency, which at many levels is a put up or shut up, right? At many, many levels. Two companies have business. They agree to do things. Are you really doing those things? Well, we're going to automate the attestations around that, like software bill of materials and the actualization of contracts. So if you agreed that, should a vulnerability show up, you will show us the rest of your SBOM or your whatever it is I need. It just happens. And it's not two people having a call and sharing a spreadsheet. It's just built into the system. And that changes things. Mm-hmm. Right? That saves money in the CI/CD development pipeline.
When it works, yes.
When it works, right? So I think we're at this point that's again why it's an evolutionary crux. It'll work or it won't. And I think we have enough cases that some will. And we'll see which models they are. But this is the time when it plays out.
Notice it. I mean, then you end up into the detection reaction issue of traditional security is, all right, your supply chain, all right, it should work. It's designed well. At what point and how do you have enough detection sensors in that supply chain to predict, hopefully, with some degree of accuracy that, this is going to go wrong in 3 days, 4 months, or a year, whatever.
Well, you can do bits of that now. We can see bits of that in productized stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And this is why this next year or two, I'm quite convinced it's going to move a certain way. We have executive orders, everybody's doing the thing, fine. But to our question here, does it really matter? Asked Bob Gorley the same thing last week, right? Does it really change things? I think the reason it's yes is the next issue. Just having an SBOM and so forth to me right now is like talking about firewalls in 99, right? It's a thing that goes between here and there, does the stuff, everybody knows. But most people are just figuring that out now. But the next step is where we start answering your questions. Now that I have the damn thing, how do I correlate? If I'm in the security operations center of a major utility with nuclear assets and using things, and there's a acronym library that's suddenly a problem, can I find it? And how do I?
You mean, can you find a reliable, trustworthy version?
Or even that, can I find, if I have it on 100 devices in my facility, but only 2 of them are deployed in a way where it could actually even theoretically be exploited, can I sort those 2 out of the 100 and focus can I just actually make use of it? Is it helpful?
This also becomes part of the growing tower problem. Because in crypto, for example, the only way to do crypto is to have your pad at least equal to or greater than the length of the message. And when it comes to systems analysis, and you go back to the work of Wisner and von Neumann and all these guys, in order to have a control system surrounding a system, the control system must be at least as complex as the system you're trying to control. And that involves such additional levels of complexity and granularity. It's where do you stop? When is good enough? When is that point? And that's an analog point in between 0 and 1. Just saying.
And I think this, we're pushing Anthony's limit of time here, so I think that's a great place to get into the last stage of it. And I think, in answer to that exact question, I would say ask Lawrence Pritchard Waterhouse about pipe organs, right? And we'll see how that plays out. But I think we have to, if we can't obviously build a thing to run the thing that's bigger than the thing because we run out of space sooner or later.
But you've got to have our industry, and I use this example a lot. We all fly a shitload of airplanes. We're on the planes all the time. Do we trust them? by and large, yeah, the statistics are showing that those GE and Rolls-Royce and Siemens ICS SCADA systems can predict the future amazingly. We have not done that in our world yet. Our depth of sensors, detection and depth is almost non-existent in my opinion.
Right. So I had this when we wrote the questions out for this session. The last one was on a scale of the dark ages to the dawn of a technical culture capable of reaching the stars. How mature do you think we really are? Right. So that's, you're speaking it. I agree, but I'm not putting words in your mouth. The cybersecurity as compared to mature industries like OT, like operational technology, maritime tech, or much less, to support even just the inner solar system we're building in the next couple of decades.
I think that the theories exist, various flavors of them. I know you've heard a lot of mine over the years. You've got a lot of very smart people who have got some interesting theories going on. I'm going to go back really where my deepest respect is right now for ICS and SCADA. Otherwise, the world would have blown up by now. Dams wouldn't work. Water wouldn't push. Electricity would. I mean, Siemens, go inside of some of these systems, and they are brilliantly engineered. In our world, we don't engineer shit. We throw a firewall on a hunk of wire and give it to a user and say, don't click. And that is not engineering. I'm sorry.
Yep. So, okay. So we're somewhere along the way. I couldn't agree more. Right. So when we can talk more after this and we have that favorite Friday afternoon call with Bob and Frank folks later today anyways. Officially thank you on behalf of the community and so forth for whatever you've done, for spending the time here with me and all the time you spent with me over the years. And everybody else for listening to this in as much as you do. We do this weekly, and come by and say hello at any time.
Listen to your local rant by Cybeats.
Right. Why not? Thank you very much.
I've enjoyed it. Thank you.